Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Hormone Helper podcast. I'm Coach Andrew, your hormone helper from Fit for All Fitness. I personally coach over 1,600 men and women to help better understand their hormones so they can lose weight and get their metabolism back on track. With this podcast, you're going to hear from me and my special guests about everything from metabolism to thyroid to weight loss. And we even talk a little bit of sexy time as we chat to spread more knowledge thick like butter on your hormones. If you're ready to learn, I'm ready to share, so let's do this. And welcome to today's podcast where we are going to be talking about the male hormone panel. And essentially, we are going to be going through the men's hormone guide. So this is going to be the how-to, what to look for, and what are the typical issues with men and their hormones, and of course, how we can navigate them. So for those of you who know, I would say about 90% of our clientele is female, but there's about 10% of clients who are in fact men. And yes, we do help men through our hormone reboot program, but also more importantly, men have more hormone problems than you think. There is a significant difference, however, and that's because the way that men's hormones appear and the way that they start to dissipate over time is a little bit different than females, because females' hormones change every 28 to 32 days. For men's hormones, essentially, they peak at 25 and then they start tanking year over year. And I say tanking because it really does change significantly. I mean, if you lose 2 to 3% a year of your testosterone at 25, imagine what 60 looks like. So we are going to be going through everything. Essentially, we'll start with some signs and symptoms that men need to look out for. We'll take a look at what the hormones are, and we're just going to be seeing where this conversation goes based off of a lot of the feedback that I've been getting from our reboot process. There are initial hormones that really everybody has to put a focus on, but there are specific ones that men need to take a look at specifically. Ladies, for you listening, it is important for you to check these things as well too, because I can openly say as a male, and this isn't just something I'm making up, as a male, men are stubborn. I give you permission to say that. And with that, they probably will not go to a doctor or will not check something unless it is considerably bad. So unless your husband absolutely can't function in a specific way, they are probably just ignoring their issues, or they're choosing to believe that they don't have an issue. So helping them out by looking out for some of these things is really important too. So from a men's hormone perspective, there are essentially a couple things that men need to take a look at for symptoms that indicate as to whether or not their hormones are out of whack. So acne or oily skin. Acne or oily skin is essentially an indicator of high levels of estrogen. There is aggressiveness or crazy mood swings, because mood swings is also an indicator that their testosterone is really low. There's apathy. So that's the lack of motivation, or the lack of drive is an indicator that there's a hormonal change. You have brain fog and cravings. You will have digestive imbalances, so things like undigested food and stool, constant bloating, abdominal cramping, abdominal distension, chronic fatigue. Low sense of humor is a big one, and a low sense of a sex drive, because both of those are also related to an estrogen and testosterone imbalance. Male pattern baldness, so that's losing the hair at the top part of the crown. Poor exercise tolerance, which means essentially that whenever you're exercising, you feel weaker, and ultimately sleep disturbances, which end up becoming weight gain or muscle loss. Those are the typical symptoms that men experience when they are having issues with the hormones. Now, the problem with hormones from a men's perspective is essentially men's hormones dissipate slowly over time, which means that basically year over year, these things are going to get harder and harder for the men's panel to be able to tolerate until they actually start becoming real issues. So these things don't appear all at once. They're things that might appear one or two at a time. And with that, they're going to be very, very small. You're not going to notice it immediately. Maybe as a man, you've been fine with weight your entire life. And then at 40, all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I don't get it. My digestion is slowing down. My metabolism is slowing down. It's harder for me to function with this. They all coincide together, and they're all related. Now, with these symptoms, essentially men need to focus on a couple main hormones. First one is testosterone. The second one is cortisol. And then your last one is your thyroid or your TSH. So the three that men need to focus on are testosterone, cortisol, and your TSH, which is your thyroid stimulating hormone. Let's talk testosterone first. So your testosterone is responsible for building and repairing lean and dense muscle tissue. So essentially creating a healthy amount of muscle is really important because that is what keeps your metabolism running over time. The more muscle you have, the more calories you burn at rest, the more energy you use, the less fat you store. That's how that is related. Now, because testosterone creates and repairs muscle, it also creates and repairs tissues. So, any type of tissue or ligament that your body is going to need repair with daily, that is what's responsible from a testosterone perspective. So, testosterone is going to repair your skin, your hair, your brittle nails, any scratches or scars that you get on the body, any joint damage. So, testosterone being really, really high is beneficial because you have a lot of muscle mass and you have good exercise tolerance and you're not having any recovery issues. And having testosterone really low is a disadvantage because what ends up happening is you get into a point where it becomes really hard for you to function. And then, of course, you start repairing it properly. So, testosterone really important to take a look at. Your second one is cortisol. Men and their stress levels. Oh boy, what can I say about this? So, having high amounts of cortisol as a man gives you higher amounts of function. It's why men tend to be more logical, why men tend to perform higher under pressure. That being said, having higher amounts of stress is terrible for your immune system, for your metabolism, for your digestion. It kills all of those other things. So while it makes you a really, really great mental performer, you're not going to be a performer in your metabolism. So having higher amounts of cortisol mean that you're going to feel chronically burnt out. It means that you're going to have chronic amounts of weight gain that's hard for you to get off. And it means that your body is going to have a higher amount of issues with anything inflammatory. So, any digestive issues, any skin issues like rashes, hives, weird spots, any colds or flus, any infections, all that is going to be monitored and managed by cortisol. So, it's important to have balanced cortisol levels. You don't want to have low cortisol because then you're going to exhibit low energy. As a male, you want to have steady cortisol. Your cortisol actually has what's called a cortisol cycle. So ideally, your body is supposed to start with the highest amount of cortisol it has through the day. And then as you go through the day, it starts to slowly decline and then wean off for the next day. This cortisol cycle from high to low, it's supposed to stay consistent. So you wake up with a consistent amount of energy, that energy goes down, you build up the same amount of consistent energy, and then it cycles through. For those of you who don't know, this is probably something that every male tends to struggle with is their energy level. And they can't seem to figure out why. It's cortisol. Cortisol is the issue for that chronic fatigue because it governs that energy response. When I was younger, when I was going through my treatment and my therapy, cortisol was something I had incredibly high of. I was abnormally high, like the ranges of, a 70-year-old, 80-year-old level high. And I was only 25. And it took me a solid 2 years to work on my cortisol before it was at maintainable levels. It builds up over time. And maybe you can tolerate high cortisol for a year or two, but as you start getting older, it catches up. And it really is something that everybody needs to put a focus on and they need to take a look at because cortisol is not really managed by your doctors. Cortisol is not something that your doctors will openly say, hey, let's check this. As a male, when you go to the doctor, they're going to check three things normally: your testosterone level, your estrogen, and your thyroid. Because that's where 90% of the problems lie, are those main ones. They don't check cortisol. Naturopaths will check cortisol, or endocrinologists will, because they know to look for these underlying issues. But cortisol being your energy hormone, it's important for you to have high amounts in the morning only, but then to have that wean off through the day as it goes down. Now, the last one is your thyroid hormone, your TSH. I want you to think of your thyroid like the furnace in your house. When your thyroid runs hot, it runs fast. And when it runs fast, you burn more calories, you have a healthy metabolism, you have a healthy libido, you have a low body fat percentage, you get all the benefits. Now, what if it runs too hot? Well, you boil all the time. You become irritable. You become agitated. It's hard for you to focus. Your furnace can be set too high sometimes. And if your thyroid is making too much thyroid stimulating hormone, those are the issues that men will tend to have. Now, let's go the other way. What if we are running slow? Well, if you run slow, you run cold. And that means you don't burn a lot of calories. It means you don't burn a lot of energy. It means you're going to have a ton of weight gain in the lower abdomen and the lower hips. And you're going to feel slow and sluggish through the day. You're also going to have lack of mental clarity too, because your thyroid running your metabolism means everything slows down. And your brain's a muscle too. For these three things, a lot of men don't understand what to look for each one of them to be able to determine, is it high, is it low, why do I actually need to change this, or do I in fact need to change this? From a testosterone perspective, testosterone and estrogen, they go hand in hand. When testosterone is high, estrogen is low. And when testosterone is low, estrogen is high. It is the yin and yang of hormones. The higher estrogen you have, the higher body fat you have. Because estrogen is fat storage. Testosterone is energy usage. So think about that. Fat storage, energy usage. If I use more energy, my fat storage goes down. If I use less energy, my fat storage goes up. So from a testosterone perspective, it's really important that men are managing their estrogen levels. As you get older, your testosterone will decline naturally. And that's all a part of the process of aging, of becoming an old fogey, as I like to say. It gets to a point where the testosterone is so low, you're like, okay, well, I can't do anything about that level anymore. So the responsibility is in managing your estrogen and keeping it as low and as stable as possible so your testosterone can thrive in that environment. So for men, it's important that they have higher zinc-based foods. Zinc and magnesium are the things that attack estrogen because they make estrogen turn off. So foods that operate in zinc are broccoli, cauliflower, asparagus, beets. You have, of course, all of your proteins, like your lean and your red meats, all have levels of zinc in them. Kidney beans, any type of beans or legumes. They're really, really great for high levels of zinc, and zinc will naturally counteract that. Or you can take a natural supplement like a ZMA, a zinc magnesium aspartate, to help do that. So one of the things that I do is I do both. So essentially I use the ZMA from Clean Basics, and then I have my zinc-based foods. You should be aiming for at least 200 milligrams of zinc a day. That should drop your estrogen level by about 10 to 15%. A safe amount for you to be in a place where testosterone can thrive. It's all about estrogen management for males. If you do that correctly and you live in a reduced stress environment, You'll be fine. Your metabolism will be great. Men don't normally suffer with hormonal issues. It's normally just the estrogen. The reason why the estrogen becomes so rampant in men is now we eat very Western diet specific, where all of our food has estrogen in it. We put deodorant on that has estrogen in it. We consume food that has plastics. We probably microwave plastics in the microwave. And all of that seeps into our food, and that's excess estrogen that goes into that. So as men, all we're doing is we're fighting the world of estrogen every single day. And as a male, if you do not know your testosterone number, go to the doctor, ask for blood work, see where your range is. The range is pretty big from a testosterone perspective, but you should be, actually, what is the exact range that you should be in? Oh, I've got it in NL, which is nanoliters. Okay, well, for those of you essentially from 40 to 55, you should be between 400 and 660 nanoliters, and blood work will be in nanoliters or milliliters. Or for men as young as 20, should be 1,000 plus. So you can see it's a really, really big range, but that's because your testosterone reduces by that 2 to 3% every year through the process. That's what you need to be looking at. Testosterone decline. That will take care of 95% of any man's hormonal issues. Estrogen. Simple. Way simpler than being a lady. But what if you take care of that and you're still having other stuff? Let's talk about the cortisol. If you live a high functioning life, like a lot of our clients do, where they're corporate execs, where they're doing 14, 15-hour days, and they're running a business, and they're trying to, take care of their kids as well too. Chronic amounts of stress reduce your cortisol to the point where you don't make any more. This is what we call in the industry adrenal fatigue. Your adrenal glands are like these little kidneys, little marbles that sit on top of your kidneys that are responsible for making your cortisol. And if we are constantly using more cortisol than we're making, I'm sure you know where that goes. It's going to be at a point at which you're short. And when you become short those hormones, then you have adrenal fatigue. Those adrenals are tired, and fat has to compensate. So the body will start producing more amounts of estrogen to try to deal with this energy usage. Ultimately, the cortisol will also affect the thyroid because your thyroid is going to tell the body to slow down. So as a male, the secondary thing that I tell men to focus with is stress management. So many guys out there, you got to manage your overwhelm. You got to talk through your challenges. You got to take a little bit of rest time for you. It's not stupid. It's not geeky. Promise you don't have to sit in front of a thing and do breath work or something. It's about being able to slow down your body so then that way your cortisol can become stable again. So sleep is a really big one for this. Getting a minimum of your 6 hours of sleep, and that has to be deep quality good sleep. Not 6 hours of tossing and turning, of actually repairing, recovering, feeling good with the body. Sleep will improve your cortisol, and that's going to improve your hormone panel as a man. Second thing from a cortisol perspective is going to be actually managing your daily stress levels. So what I like to tell people is being aware of your heart rate. Your heart rate is a great indicator of how stressed you are. Anything above 80 beats per minute is indicating some level of stress. Now, if you're out of shape, or if you don't do activity and your heart rate starts at above that, you're always under stress. Always. Your body cannot tell the difference between physical stress, emotional stress, or mental stress. It all reads the same. It all uses cortisol. So if you're feeling chronically fatigued and burned out and you're struggling with weight issues, chances are those three things, all of those stressors, are affecting your cortisol. So heart rate. Anything above 100 beats per minute is indicating some level of stress to your body. And you can watch this happen in real time. When you go through a stressful situation, put your two fingers right on the palm of your hand or right on the neck vein, and you count your beats per minute. Count how many pulsations you feel, check your heart rate and your pulse within a minute. And you're going to feel that increase. You had a bad work meeting, boom, spike in your heart rate. Your body's feeling taxed because you've done too much in terms of activity, boom, your heart rate. You're having an emotional struggle and you're fighting with your wife for some reason, or your kids are overwhelming you, boom, you'll feel that heart rate rise. That is the indicator for you to stop and to slow it down. I am in the habit of checking my heart rate at least 2 to 3 times a day because I want to make sure that I'm in a stable place where I can stop and I can lower my cortisol levels. So that way I'm not reactive in the moment and I'm not overusing my cortisol because that gas tank is very small. By doing that, my cortisol becomes stable every day. When I wake up and I have high levels of energy in the morning, it's because my cortisol is giving me the capacity to do so. I always make sure that I leave a quarter tank of energy in my system so my cortisol can always recover the next day. That's what you need to be doing from your cortisol. And the last one, the thyroid. Your thyroid being a furnace and being a thermostat, you have a little bit of control. Like the thermostat in your house, you can dial it up and dial it down a little bit. But ultimately, if your furnace is broken, you're screwed. You need a new furnace. Now, your thyroid, its job is to help all of the other hormones. If cortisol is short, gives a little to cortisol. If testosterone is short, gives a little testosterone. If estrogen is short, it gives a little there. So your thyroid being that main hub of splitting up all of your hormones, if it's too busy giving to the other hormones, it doesn't have enough for itself, and that's when you start having thyroid issues. Having thyroid issues is where you will start to see all of the muscle issues. Muscle wasting, muscle loss, thin and weak muscle tissue, poor tolerance to exercise where you exercise and you feel sore for like 2 weeks. All of that is an indicator that your thyroid is not performing or functioning right. Besides that, temperature is also a main indicator. Where for your thyroid, if you start feeling cold all the time, cold hands and cold feet, or you have a poor tolerance to the cold, that is also an indicator that your furnace is not running well. So, what can we do from a thyroid perspective? We need B vitamins in our diet. B vitamins are the precursor to creating thyroid hormones. Your B3, your B6, and your B12. I encourage every man to take a male multivitamin, and Clean Basics has a really solid one, because that gives at least the bare minimum you need daily. Otherwise, you need to be intaking foods that have high B vitamins to be able to get the precursor for your thyroid. So, what are some good B vitamin foods? Well, kiwi is great, avocado is great, any type of fish is really, really good, or any type of nut or tree oil. So sesame seed oil, avocado oil, olive oil, those types of things have the B6, B3, and B12. And by just implementing those foods into your diet, you can be able to increase those levels. And you need a minimum of 100 milligrams daily of each of the B vitamins. By doing that, your thyroid is at least going to have enough of the precursor to make more thyroid hormone. Now, your thyroid doesn't just make one hormone, it makes multiple of them. So it makes TSH, but it also makes something called LH, which is your luteinizing hormone, and your LSH, which is FSH, which is your follicle stimulating hormone. So because it has to split the hormones between three, plus support all of the other hormones that are short, you got to manage that. So the priority falls in that order that I just listed it. Testosterone should be your main and primary focus always. When you're young, when you're getting older, when you're past 60, that's my definition of old, past 60. Until I get there, that's what dictates old. So so testosterone, number one focus. Secondary focus then becomes cortisol, addressing the stressors, making sure as that tackles the main level of energy through the day. And then your third is your thyroid. All of those issues can be corrected with food. And one of the things that we do through the Vantage process and the Hormone Reboot program is we will go through and adjust all of these with the specific vitamins and minerals. So we look at the micronutrients that adjust that. And by doing it through food, it makes it a lot easier for you to maintain than doing it through the supplements too. So it can be kind of overwhelming if you always have to supplement for stuff. So I try to do things via a food first, and that's why it helps implement with that. So once we address that, the weight issues go away, the metabolism issues go away, you start having higher levels of energy because of the testosterone, you start having a better libido, better sexy time. That's always good. And it allows you to be put in a testosterone dominant phase where you feel good. Men's hormones have changed significantly since the 50s. In the 50s, they had 30% more testosterone than we do now. And that's because genetics, we have lost the ability to use a lot of our muscles and function because we don't work as hard with our body anymore. And that's fine. The other part of it, though, is the Western diet that I talked about. All of the estrogen we eat within food, you seriously need to watch your estrogen sources. So watch the deodorants you use to make sure that there's no chemicals for estrogen. Watch any skincare products you put on you. Watch the cologne. You cologne guys, all of our clients use it. Watch it because that can be very, very metal heavy and have estrogen. And then, of course, watch the preservatives in food. So there's a lot of stuff to watch, but if you just do it daily and you make a habit of checking, it's like a 2 to 5 minute check every day. And then makes it really easy for you to manage the thyroid and do that. So that is all for essentially the men's hormone guide through this process. Men who have and exhibit hormone issues outside of those three, the issue tends not to be hormonal, but more mechanical. What I mean by that is there's a limit to what we can do with food. And sometimes men have hormone issues because they have a dysfunction. So like me, with my varicolectomy that I had to do, I had to have a testicle removed. That means that I will permanently be deficient in testosterone. So because of that, I have a mechanical issue, not a hormonal issue. A mechanical issue is anything that happens to your body in which a certain body part isn't working. If you have to cut out a piece of your thyroid because of a cancer, if you have a pituitary, the gland in your brain, a disorder that prevents you from being able to make a specific hormone, if you have a kidney that's missing for a certain condition, all of those mechanical things that happen will affect your hormones as well too. So as long as you do not have a mechanical issue, the guide that we went through is going to be good for you, and it's going to tackle your problems because those three things are true hormonal problems. If you have a mechanical issue, then I would encourage you to speak to an endocrinologist or a specialist. And if you need, message me. I'll drop the email in under the show notes, and you can be able to do that. Otherwise, this is going to be your go-to guide. So that is all for the men's guide for today. Thanks for listening. Well, it seems I'm all out of info juice for today. That's all for this episode, and thank you so much for listening. Please leave a raving review for me if you've learned something good, and make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss an episode. Now, if you're in the mood for some more great content and tools to get your hormones on track, why not check out our free Facebook group and the blog on our site. We do amazing weekly trainings in our group that me and my wife call Tea and Teachings that give good tips for anything hormones and metabolism related. It's also a great community where you get to share your goals and success with like-minded people just like you. I'll make sure to drop both the Facebook group link and the blog link in the show notes for you. Or if you're ambitious like me, the name of the group is Weight Loss and Balanced Hormones. It'll say Fit for All beside it with a picture of me. So come and join us and have more fun.